So good morning, folks. It's 11 a.m. So Alicia, should we just dive in or?
Yep, let's go.
Okay, great. So good morning, folks. It's really great to have everybody here. And welcome to Skills for California, Advancing Workforce Development Through Earn and Learn Models, Apprenticeships, Career Technical Education, and more. My name is Rebecca Hanson, and I'll be moderating this panel for this morning's session. And just a little bit on me, I'm the executive director of the SEIU UHW Joint Employer Education Fund and the Shirley Ware Education Center. We're a multi-employer labor management partnership training 100,000 workers across Western states. And I'm also the chair of the Interagency Committee on Apprenticeship that many of the folks calling in today probably are involved with. And as we get started, I just want to remind folks to use the chat and submit questions along the way. It's being monitored and collected, and also to chat any technical issues that you're facing and to get help. We know that it's been a very hard year for everybody. And it's been all hands on deck really in California, not only in thinking about how we can recover from the economic impact of the pandemic, but also, and really critically, how we can rebuild a more just and equitable economy. Earn and Learn programs offer a solid training pathway to highly skilled jobs that benefit both workers and employers. And by allowing workers to combine on-the-job training and related formal instruction, workers are able to get themselves back on track to enter the skilled trades. Earn and Learn models, it's always touted in California that we are the home of the tech industry, but our state also has growing demand for healthcare and skilled trade positions to deal with housing and other needs. And we know that workers need to have greater access to high quality training to enter these high skill, high demand jobs. So today our panelists are here to discuss how to expand training models and also how to open those training opportunities to underrepresented workers and what policymakers can do to help workers access the right training and experience to enter high skill jobs. And so I'm really happy to introduce and welcome our panel today. And so for each of you, I want to introduce you and then have you spend a few minutes to introduce yourselves, give more information on your organization and your work, and then we'll move to Q&A and we'll also open it up for participation from the audience. So I want to start by introducing Jeremy Smith from the State Building and Construction Trades.
Thank you, Rebecca. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Good, good. I got myself off mute before I started talking. That's a big step for me. Well, thank you for having me. Thank you all for being here. Jeremy Smith with the State Building and Construction Trades Council. I'm the Deputy Legislative Director. The State Building Trades is a council of about 150 construction trade unions from California. We represent right around 450,000 construction workers who are in unions in California. That includes, depending on the day, 67, 68,000 apprentices in California who are in state-approved joint labor management apprenticeship programs. The president of the State Building Trades is Robbie Hunter, an iron worker. He has been here starting his third four-year term. And apprenticeship is very important to him, as it is to our executive board as well. It's got to be the right type of apprenticeship, though. We believe in our model, which is a joint labor management model. We work very closely with our contractors, our contractor partners, our management, quote unquote, to jointly administer and run those programs. I can explain more how that works when I speak later, but basically we just work together to make sure we're doing the right thing to meet the needs of the industry and the workers. We also care very much about this idea of pre-apprenticeship. It's really taken hold over the last 5 or 6 years. And I can talk more about that later too, but we're happy to be here and Rebecca, thank you for moderating. I'm sure it's going to be a great panel. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeremy. Great. And we can move on to John Brauer from the California Labor Federation Workforce and Economic Development Program.
Clicked on here. Good morning, everybody. Happy to be here and talk with you all about what the state is up to and could be up to kind of going forward. The California Labor Federation is roughly 1,000 unions that represent roughly 2 million workers in the state of California. Our affiliates are in every sector of the California economy. And so we are in just about everything, including the building trades, but beyond that, just about everything that you can think of. Public agencies, manufacturing, healthcare, communications, transportation, hospitality, you name it, in it. The WED program, we are sort of the technical assistance arm for the Labor Federation and our affiliates and their members. We help put together labor management training partnerships, support our affiliates doing that, which include apprenticeship and pre-apprenticeship and other partnership activities, high road training partnerships in particular. And we work with our local building trades councils, with the state building trades councils, our central labor councils, and affiliates up and down the state. We also are actively involved in the rapid response layoff aversion for unions up and down the state, and work with both local and state entities like EDD in relationship to that. And we also help our labor reps who are represented on the 45 workforce boards, as well as the state workforce board as a TA. And the other thing I would say is, and probably most important for all of you here who may not all come from labor primarily, is we probably are the one entity that can help explain labor to you and help find partnerships. So if nothing else, feel free to reach out afterwards in that context for how to engage affiliates and labor management training partnerships kind of going forward.
Thank you so much, John. So next I want to move to our next panelist, which is Carla Javits from the Roberts Enterprise Development Fund, REDF.
Great, it's wonderful to be with everybody today, fellow panelists, terrific panel. Carla Javits, CEO, President of REDF. Mani Grewal, who's our head of policy, is on the call, so she may add in the chat. And I saw Terry Feely's on there, who many of you may know, and she does a ton of work with REDF, so she may also add in. You know, I think our work is very much in the spirit of the summit. It's about access for workers that typically don't have that access to good jobs, these earn and learn approaches. REDF's mission is to accelerate the growth and impact of what we call employment social enterprise. And the purpose is to achieve a thriving and more inclusive and equitable economy. What are employment social enterprises? They're basically mission-driven businesses that provide paying jobs combined with training and services that help employees gain stability, skills, confidence they need to stay employed and to build a better life. It's basically an employer-based approach from end to end. And with this integrated approach, they create pathways to economic mobility for people who are talented and have a lot to offer, but are not a priority of the traditional workforce system or hired by many employers. People, again, who are very talented, have a desire to contribute to the economy, but may have had experiences with the justice system, homelessness, mental illness, addiction. So the path to a quality job can seem really insurmountable and leave a lot of people out. Many of the successful entrepreneurs who are at the helm of these businesses are people of color, and many share the life experiences of the people that they employ. And additionally, because these enterprises reinvest their profits in their businesses, they can help more people. They may require less funding and be more sustainable than some other programs. Just to kind of give it at a high level, the scope of this, REDF has provided capital and advisory services to more than 200 of these companies nationally, about 90 of them in California. And I would say California is really the national leader in this field. These 90 social enterprises have trained and employed almost 30,000 people, about half from 2018 to 2020 alone. You know, about 80% of the people employed are justice impacted. About 70% are Black and Latino, and that is due to the long history of structural racism in the criminal justice system, housing, many other systems we know about. And we've got a lot of great independent research that verifies that on-the-job experience in these particular businesses more than doubles job retention, increases wages and income, and decreases recidivism. So it's an exciting field, it's a growing field, and I'm excited to be here today to talk a little about it.
Thank you, Carla. Excited to talk more with you about that as well. Finally, I want to introduce Andrea Vizenor from Skyline Community College. So Andrea, if you could just give us a little background on your work and your organization.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. Again, my name is Andrea Vizenor. I'm the Dean of Strategic Partnerships and Workforce Development at Skyline College. I'm not a traditional educator. I actually come from a 10-year career within Hyatt Hotels, then moving into high school education and taught for about 9 years, and have now been in the community college system for about 8. I always share that story because it's an interesting lens to look at the work as we think about workforce development and certainly responding in this post-COVID, soon-to-be environment. Skyline College serves over 9,000 students annually and supports innovation and educational training programs really committed to social justice and equity. It's awesome to be here with all of you today as part of the Skills for California Summit, and I look forward to sharing our response strategies. That was something that we quickly jumped into action around back in April and May of last year, and then also really sharing some of the highlights around our short-term workforce training projects that include adult education, high school, and industry collaboration. So it's exciting to be here with you all today.
Thank you so much, Andrea. So we'll dive right in on some questions, and definitely folks who are listening in, please feel free to put things in the chat or the Q&A that's being monitored, and we'll be collecting the questions and getting to those shortly. I wanted to start out with a question for John and Jeremy. The governor recently proposed $5.2 billion in workforce programs, including $20 million allocated for construction apprenticeships. Can you talk about what policy changes you think are necessary to best maximize the historic investment?
Jeremy, you want to start on the construction side?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, John. Thank you for the question, Rebecca. Policy change wise, I'm pretty pleased with where things stand. You know, a lot of that money is going to go through the State Workforce Development Board between their High Road Training Partnership Initiative and their High Road Construction Career Initiative. They are on the right track when it comes to making sure that money goes to create good jobs, high road jobs. You know, I'm on the board. This is something we talk about every board meeting. So, you know, not against any further policy changes to what the existing initiatives, and we can fine tune them and make them work better, but I'm happy with the track they're on. Of course, I'm also happy that the governor and the administration want to put more money into this. We'll always welcome that. There's always room for more training dollars in the system. I will just add, though, that when it comes to a construction apprenticeship, it's important for everybody to remember that construction apprentices learn on the job. They don't learn on Zoom like all of us are right now. There's some classroom work. There's some, we have some training facilities where you do in-house training, obviously, but a majority of an apprentice's training comes on the job. An apprentice, after a year, after 6 months, they're a construction worker. They're on a job doing construction work under the supervision of journeymen and journeywomen. So we always we'll never turn down money into the system for training. That can always be used. We would encourage the administration and policymakers to look at how to provide public investment into construction projects. There's a lot of construction going on in downtown Sacramento of state office buildings since COVID and the realization that a lot of this work can be done from home, and we can maybe not need office buildings as much as we thought in the past. Who knows how much that's going to be in our state's future, the construction of new buildings. But it's important, any kind of money that gets thrown into the system, if we could, earmark an identical amount for 1 or 2 construction projects, that would be something we would recommend, because public investment into construction projects is what's going to help drive the need for apprentices and drive their ability to get trained. The affordable housing sector is another big one. We all know about the lack of affordable housing. We're working very hard at the Capitol to make sure that state approved apprentices and journeymen and journeywomen who are on affordable housing projects come from state approved apprenticeship programs to also drive that demand. That's just something I want everybody to kind of leave today with when it comes to the construction sector, is that you need to have places for apprentices to go work to get their training. And so we're happy with the investment in the training system, but further investment into public construction projects would be helpful too.
Thank you, Jeremy. John, do you want to tackle this?
I think I also am really happy with the continued investment that the state is making around the higher road training partnerships, that particularly the State Workforce Board is making. We believe that in terms of advancing equity and access and being effective, that those high road partnerships are the best models that the state has going on. I'm glad that they're making other investments in partnership with the community college system. We also, though, I think from labor's end, want to make sure that those do in fact include industry as partners, both employers and labor in that equation. And then going from there, the only other piece that I would love in the future is, beyond the building trades and construction side, is looking at the state making more high road partnership investments in areas where they've got initiatives that they want to really move the ball on from a demand side, meaning from things like reducing greenhouse gas in transportation in all aspects, or in healthcare, and advancing things like for home care workers and such. So moving the ball on those areas, I think, are going to be really important, as well as to continue to have means and supporting programs like Carla's, where you're actually adding to access for different populations of disadvantaged workers, whether they're folks from the reentry community or homeless or others. The state is in fact supporting public sector initiatives through that high road partnership for those kinds of things, and really wanting to make them go forward. And lastly, I'm just hoping that at the end of the day, maybe not at the end of the year, but in a couple of years, we can show that there was a real effectiveness by this large investment that's being made. My only other fear is around the sustainability aspect, that we've got money from the feds and the state is doing well economically to make these investments, that you just hope that the well doesn't run dry come June 30th, 2022.
Mm-hmm. No, that makes a lot of sense. So it's sort of like expanding access and also ensuring that we're making investments that have long-term impact and sustainability as we move forward. And this is sort of a question for all of you that I think builds on some comments you made, John. So California has set really high goals for itself in addressing climate change, and we're all hearing about needing more green jobs. How does this align with your organization's work, if each of you could speak to this? And also, where do policymakers need to go next to make those goals real? And I don't know who wants to start on this one, but just open it up to all of you to kind of talk a little bit about how climate change and the opportunity in green jobs impacts your work and how you think about that for policymakers.
I'll start. I don't want to hog the conversation, but I'll just start. I think from our end, and is we don't view all the trying to address climate change as just creating green jobs. We think this is the greening of a lot of existing occupations and work in existing sectors, not just the building trade side, and I'll let Jeremy talk to that, but in transportation, in automotive. I still want somebody to go to Andrea's automotive apprentice program and learn the basics of becoming a machinist apprentice, and then learning on the back end the zero emission technology that's being involved, or the same in bus manufacturing, or frankly in healthcare, or whatever the sector is. A lot of it is just the greening of jobs. So having a training and pathways and workforce development efforts that are frankly just taking into account the adaptation due to technology or work processes or other knowledge that folks have. It's building on existing stuff that's already there as opposed to creating new things, I think is how I think about it, frankly.
I'll play off of John since he always loves to support the community college system, and I deeply appreciate that. I would echo what he mentioned around making sure that our programs, whatever pathway that they're in, is really taking into consideration the connections to green jobs and how that impacts each of the sectors that we serve in training, workforce and short-term training programs. I think there's also this opportunity to make sure that we're remaining relevant, staying connected to industry needs and really the expectations of the skills that they're looking for in our students as we're preparing them. We also have some innovative ways that we integrate sustainability across our campus, both in the classroom and kind of beyond. Our programs foster sustainability behavior, promote environmental science awareness, and inspire action in this area. We also partner with the Climate Corps Bay Area. It's a 10-month professional development program for emerging sustainability and climate change protection professionals. And so folks are enrolled at Skyline College and they work at various agencies around the Bay Area on climate resiliency projects and education, government, and private companies. We also partner with Strategic Energy Innovations to create some really cool, vibrant dual enrollment partnerships that support entry into 3 of our certificate programs and our 2-year programs in environmental science. The certs are really climate protection professional certifications, really focusing on preparing students in the areas of current climate protection approaches, policies in California, the different types of tools that are used in those roles, as well as workplace effectiveness and communication. We also have a 6-unit certificate in solar design, estimation, finance, and sales. So really focusing on that area. And then really energy efficiency certifications as well. So focusing on preparation for students to become energy auditors, home energy, raters, retrofit techs, installers, and things like that. I would just say that, as an innovative community college, we're always committed to being flexible, right? We have to be responsive to the needs. We have to make sure that we're having those seamless connections to industry partners so that we're getting that regular feedback around changes and impact. We always want to keep pace with the ever-changing workforce needs and the growth that's happening. But I think one of the biggest things around legislation is really supporting students' participation in these programs. And really making sure that we talk about access, but is that childcare, is that, being paid to go to training so that you can still pay your rent, so that you can still sustain your family while you're preparing for a career. And so I think there's an opportunity as we think about legislation and really speaking specifically to these types of training and development programs that we include funding for that. Thank you.
That's great, Andrea. Thanks, Carla.
Yeah, maybe just to build on that, I can get to the policy piece, but just as examples, there's a wonderful organization in Los Angeles called Grid Alternatives, and they're a leader in providing access to solar power, clean tech to low-income people. So the mission is to provide that in affordable housing, et cetera. And, they've helped 600 trainees move into green careers, access to those quality jobs. And they're very focused on access for people who otherwise are very unlikely to get a job, let alone a job in the green economy. And then we're blessed not only, a lot of people probably on the chat know about, or on the call know about the California Conservation Corps, which is at the state level, but there are 13 conservation corps scattered throughout the state. And all of them, long before green jobs maybe became so, such a focus, have been doing, recycling, habitat restoration, many different activities. And they've been employing young people who, face tremendous barriers to work and providing them with support, et cetera, and education. And I think, what can be done on a policy level, and you can certainly see it shot throughout the Corps in terms of how well they've done, first of all, is procurement. The state can mandate or can provide incentives to include social enterprises as second-tier suppliers with some of the larger companies that, that Jeremy and John tend to work with. They can in turn sub to some of these smaller entities that are more of a gateway in for people who otherwise don't have access. And then I think the other thing, and you have some workforce boards on the phone, every workforce board in the state can do is channel more of the money that it has to support transitional jobs. They're permitted to use funding for transitional employment, but most of them don't use very much and don't use the full amount that they're entitled to use. And the state itself is now permitting through a waiver more of those funds to be used for transitional jobs. And I think, we should encourage that.
Thank you, Carly. Jeremy, do you want to get in on this question?
I would, thank you. Our unions already train our members on this green economy. Our members already build the vast majority of the utility scale solar, biomass, and onshore wind and hydro, geothermal, all the things we think about when we think about a green energy grid moving forward. So we're already prepared to do that, to do a lot of that work. I just wanted to touch briefly on this idea of transition. The construction work in the oil and gas industry inside the fence line of a refinery, for example, those are high road jobs. The steel workers work in that industry as well. They've organized that industry so they do the formulation of oil and gas into the end product that we all use. But the construction work in there is heavy construction work. It's legit, construction work, and those are very much high road jobs. What we found is that this idea of green jobs, especially for construction workers, we're all still trying to figure out what green jobs means. But we've done a study that shows wages and benefits in that green industry do not match the wages and benefits in the oil and gas industry, for example. So we need to be, we're urging policymakers to think about what a just transition means. And while we all agree that a transition to a new economy and to new power production, for example, will need to happen at some point, we need to, at the same time, as policymakers, we need to think about how it affects the workers in the industry that's getting transitioned away from. And what we've seen so far is some of the wages and benefits in that industry for construction workers do not match what they might make now. And so I think we all need to be cognizant of that. We don't want to create a new problem while we fix a current problem. So just moving forward for the policymakers on the phone, keep in mind what it means to transition, and let's figure some of this out before we we go full scale into the transition to a new green economy.
Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you all for your thoughts on that question. I think it gave a really nice breadth of kind of what the issues are that we all need to be thinking about, and policymakers in particular. Moving on to a question for Carla. When we think about apprenticeship, we often focus on traditional work models. And Carla, you already shared a bit about how Reddit is thinking about systemically barriered populations and how to serve them and how programs can better serve them. Can you just talk a little bit about your work, thinking about scale and how to move forward in building out an apprenticeship model that really does serve the folks that you're focused on serving?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks so much. Yeah, maybe I'd just start out. I had the privilege of being on the California Future of Work Commission, and I learned there that a third of the workers in California make $15 an hour or less. So Jeremy's point is a great point. As we're creating new jobs, let's make sure that people are getting paid enough to survive and live in the nice housing that many workers involved in all of Jeremy and John's programs are building. So that is, critical. And then, hundreds of thousands of people in California are homeless or become homeless every year, or are incarcerated and come home from incarceration every year. And we can do a heck of a lot better at seeing that they're employed and hopefully seeing that they're building that affordable and supportive housing that the trades are involved with. But to do that, we need some sort of pipeline for access, because many of these programs, as well-intentioned as they are, have not really provided access to individuals who face challenges like this. Talented, want to work, but there's a lot of things. So one thing we're especially interested in, and John, you mentioned this, which is great, is the diversification of the kinds of jobs that people can get through apprenticeship programs. It's great that it's in the construction trades, and it's been largely in the trades, but there are great examples. Like I would cite Kitchens for Good in San Diego is a wonderful social enterprise, and they have a certified apprenticeship program that specifically targets people who have been incarcerated, homeless, and individuals in the foster care system. And they are aiming to get into the culinary and hospitality industry in jobs that pay more than minimum wage, that are on a track to the good jobs there. So there are certainly some, and we should look for more flexibility in terms of the kinds of jobs that people are in. And then second, I would say, to achieve the objective that I think we all have of making it an inclusive and accessible economy where people are able to get quality jobs, it's going to require multi-sector partnership. No one entity can do it by itself. We need to partner with apprenticeship programs, partner with the community colleges. There's a wonderful example in Los Angeles called LA Rise, the LA Regional Initiative for Social Enterprise. That is serving more than 1,000 people every year. It's a multi-sector partnership. People get a job in a social enterprise, they get support. It's a partnership with employers, many, and community colleges. Many get additional training and then move on into good jobs. We have a coalition called Reset in California of these social enterprises, and they've been active in advocating for more public resources to flow to social enterprise. And we've been looking at this with Amity Foundation, which does a lot of service to people who've been incarcerated, New Avenues to Work, and others, seeking to do something similar to that statewide. So we could possibly serve, many, many more people. And I would say as a starting point, just to maybe leave this on an optimistic note, the governor in the May revise, among other investments, has suggested a $150 million additional investment in a Caltrans effort. Now that may seem a little off the beaten track, but it is essentially a high road training partnership. It's existed for a long time, but they're building it out. And it is explicitly to provide jobs to people who've been incarcerated, provide support, income, training, and then move some into jobs with Caltrans, union jobs with Caltrans. And then we think that there's the possibility to open up the pipeline to other kinds of jobs, utilities, housing, et cetera. The Division of Apprenticeship Standards seems quite interested in that. And some of the utility companies seem really interested. So I think, we're looking at how to create more access and more inclusiveness for people really who, despite the best efforts of many of these traditional apprenticeship programs, have not been able to qualify and have not gotten in and have not been successful when they've gotten there. So we need that kind of partnership with folks like Jeremy, John, Andrea, and others in all these different systems in order to really lean in and help the hundreds of thousands of people in our state who want to work, but often can't find that pathway into the sorts of terrific apprenticeship and other training programs that exist.
Yeah, thank you, Carla. That makes a ton of sense. And I'm sure we're going to get into that a little bit more when we move on to some audience questions. Before we do that, I just want to give one more question to Andrea, specifically around the hospitality industry that I know you have such a strong background in, and has been so hard hit during the pandemic. How is Skyline College responding and helping prepare students during this time?
Thank you, Rebecca. And of course, the trash delivery folks were like coming by. I'm like, okay, wait a minute. Okay, so hopefully you're not hearing all the background noise. So Skyline College and our district more specifically really got together, as I mentioned, back in April and said, okay, what are our response strategies? How can we really support our community during these unprecedented times? And so we really focused on 4 different areas, addressing job elimination, whether it be short-term or long-term. And of course, that really focused on the area of hospitality workers. And really coming up with plans around short-term workforce development training. We also looked at small business recovery. We know a lot of hospitality employees are those who are owning restaurants or other types of hospitality companies. And then what is the changing workforce going to need, and how can we be responsive as a community college through customized professional development or also kind of smaller training programs that really get that in-demand skill preparation that's going to be necessary. And then lastly, career readiness. We knew that even though we were going through a pandemic, there were still a lot of jobs that were out there, and folks needed to know that we could get them connected to the jobs that were open and prepare them, whether it be resume design and development, taking their current hospitality skills and really making sure that they could represent the new types of skills that different companies might be looking for. And so our short-term training programs, again, it was moving away from, oh, we have to wait till next semester. It's like, no, we have to launch programs next month. Let's make it happen. And so really putting together course combinations, whether it be for credit or not for credit, that it says, hey, you can prepare to become a UX designer in 6 months. Here's what it looks like, start to finish, and what those types of jobs would require and look like. Additionally, we focused on human resources, management type jobs, also child development education tracks. So really feeding into an area that we knew also was going to be really important once we started recovery of the pandemic. And that was a partnership with our adult school, 2 of our adult schools in the area, both South San Francisco Adult School and Jefferson Adult School. So really integrating language acquisition, but also industry recognized certifications and teacher permit preparation. So again, start to finish in 6 months, you can do these types of things and enter these jobs. And then really bringing our career readiness and job placement coordinators on the campus to those programs at the right time, so that you're not only learning the workforce area competencies, but then you're also building your confidence in and the marketability that you would need to then enter the workforce after. We also focused on sales and marketing management as well. So really paying attention to the types of careers that were going to be pandemic proof, not only in the moment, but also post-pandemic. We also included things like Becoming an Online Learner 101. We knew the transition to online wasn't for everyone. And so the more that you could kind of take away some of those hesitations that folks might have around the use of technology, we thought would be critical. We also made sure that folks had access to technology, whether it had been a laptop or hotspots, those types of things at no cost to them. And then also just really making sure that we were integrating peer mentors into the course experiences. So it didn't feel like you had to go seek something because you weren't quite prepared, but really that the program was designed to provide that level of engagement for individuals in our communities who wanted to potentially pivot into a new career. We also partnered with the Four Seasons in our area because they had employees that were furloughed. And so we wanted to design some training and development for them to continue to, advance their expertise in the industry, but also supervisory skills. And one of the things that I'm really kind of most excited about is this alternative Pathways to Tech project that we've been working on since January, where we brought together employers, students, and faculty members to create short-term training programs in 6 different areas: technology sales, junior full stack engineer, data science analyst, junior applied AI specialist, DevOps, and cloud developers. And so this is really awesome programming that is not your traditional comm science, I got to go to a 4-year, but that you're getting the right training in the right time to enter entry level and middle skill jobs within the tech industry. Our work group was made up of women and students of color. And so really making sure that the representation was intentional, that we were designing programming that was going to be feeling a certain way for our community members, that it would feel that this is a place for everyone. In addition to that, really paying attention to integrating project-based learning, the types of technology kind of skill prep as you're prepping for interviews, and that connections to jobs. And so we're launching that in the fall, and we're really excited with the amount of work that happened just in a short amount of time. I know sometimes the community college system gets this thing like, why does it take you so long? But we're really excited to also explore pre-apprenticeship models in that space. We have some major employers like NVIDIA and a variety of other folks who are interested in that work. So those are just a few things that Skyline has done in response to just the disruption within the hospitality industry. And I will also share that we went from kind of an 11% unemployment rate to now just over 4% in San Mateo County. And so now we're really focused on recovery. What does recovery look like? If you've been to a hotel lately, business is definitely picking up. So it's about then getting folks back into the jobs that were there previously.
Thank you, Andrea. So a lot happening, and everything's changing so quickly too. So just appreciate the speed at which you're trying to continue to adjust to that. So just to dive in, there's an audience question. I think it sort of relates back to a lot of things that have already been discussed by each of you. It's just like, how are we expanding the apprenticeship model? And I think in California, there's such a lofty goal in some ways of almost like a 5 times increase in the number of current apprentices, which I think is currently around 90,000, and about 7% of those being women at this point in time. And so the question from the audience is, how can we incentivize apprenticeships and other earn and learn program models to be more accessible to women, in particular in the building trade? So Jeremy, I'm thinking you probably have a lot to say about this. But the audience member said, in my experience, building trades typically leads to higher pay, higher quality jobs than earn and learn programs in many other sectors, and is made up predominantly of male participants. Yeah, and that makes sense. And I'll just share that also in our work. We do registered apprenticeships in healthcare in the acute care setting, and it's a big lift to get these programs off the ground, and it's been slow, right? So while we have a majority women in our programs, and also a lot of the programs we have are into very good high pay jobs in professional, technical, and nursing roles, they're not at the scale that the building trades has achieved. So I definitely have an interest in hearing on this question as well. It's just like, how do we continue to build and expand? And I think to Carla's point, it's not only for women, but it's also just for folks who have traditionally faced barriers. How do we think about these programs scaling up, and in doing so, creating greater inclusivity?
Do I go first?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's quite a spectrum of concerns when it comes to getting more women in the trades. It runs the gamut from cultural stereotypes to not enough career technical education in high schools, which helps all kids in high school, not just women, get exposed to it. So, we're working very diligently to attract more women to join apprenticeship and to join the building trades. I will say that over 90% of the female graduates who graduate from an apprentice to a journeywoman come from our joint labor management programs, our state programs. We have the vast majority of the graduates, of the female graduates. It's unfortunately not enough. We need to do more. So we are working, at the state level. We passed a couple bills over the last 4 years to help with the job site environment, sexual harassment training, training just on how to have a more inclusive construction job site. We picked up on some of that, some regulations passed by the Obama administration and codified those into statute here. So there's that. We also spend a lot of time at the Capitol advocating for more career technical education training. Now, that's not just construction, building trades, your shop class, your traditional shop class, that can be anything. We're okay with that. There needs to be more career technical education funding writ large for the whole K-12 system. We hope that some of that will go towards shop classes, towards classes where you get a taste of what it's like to be in a construction environment. That's really hindered, I think, a lot of industries over the last 25 years, because that funding has decreased steadily as there's been a big push from policymakers at the state capitol that everybody has to go to a 4-year college to get a degree, to have a career that is meaningful. And we all know that's not true. So we're trying to turn around the aircraft carrier, as it were, on that issue, and we're doing better in the Capitol. People are picking up on that. I mentioned pre-apprenticeship at the start. That's going to be a big help, I think, as that gets gets rolled out more in the construction apprenticeship field, so that, again, for all workers, for all prospective apprentices, not just women, you get an idea not only of what a career in construction is like, starting your work at 6, not showing up in flip-flops, having to kind of be in shape, right, and work hard, to hey, what kind of craft do you want to get into? We found, we came up with the multi-craft core curriculum because a lot of our apprenticeship programs were realizing, we're having apprentices realize 6 months in, a year in, that, for example, a career in the ironworkers industry is not for them because they don't like hanging off of an I-beam on the 45th floor of a building with no walls or roof. Yeah. Right. So we want to figure kind of that stuff out before apprentices get into our programs or get too far down the line. We have a technical assistance grant. We were awarded through the SB1, the 2017 increase in the gas tax, to do some of this work and outreach to women. We want to get women to do outreach to women. That is really effective, we found. Even to the level of granularity, like on TikTok and Instagram, and posting pictures and testimonials at that level to encourage more women to look at a career in the trades. I know that our LA Orange County Building Trades Council down in Los Angeles, they just recently got a grant to do more outreach to women. This is more than on our radar. This is top of the list for us. And we found really that the best way to get more women into the trades is to have women talk to women and tell them about it. So we're going to redouble our efforts to get that done. But it's a great career for anybody with with the wages and the benefits. You know, the 6 a.m. to 3 p.m. model, that doesn't always hold true, but for the most part, that's a 8-10 hour day. That's good for moms and dads when it comes to childcare, picking up their kids, and it runs the gamut from what you make to the hours. It certainly helps raise a family and have a good career that comes out of it. So we know about this. We want to fix it. We want to make it better. We're working on it. But there's a broad spectrum of issues that we have to kind of confront, from just how it is on the job site to what policymakers at the state capital think about construction careers and getting more women and young people exposed to them at an early age. So we're working on, it's a multifaceted front. We're working hard to make it better.
Maybe
Carla, you look ready to go. Yeah,
yeah,
go ahead.
I'm happy to jump in. No, I really appreciate those comments, Jeremy. Thank you for those. And I just wanted to build on one of those by saying, that I wholeheartedly agree, pre-apprenticeship critical, for people to work out various things about what they really want to do, and then, be ready to get on the job. Interestingly, there's a piece of legislation moving, I neglected to mention it, SB 779, and it kind of amends the list of earn and learn programs by specifying that those include transitional jobs, as described in federal WIOA, and subsidized employment as provided by an employment social enterprise or a worker cooperative, another wonderful approach, especially for people who face barriers to employment. So I think, it's very important for us to define in a wider array of perhaps less traditional access points, if you will, for people who might not traditionally access, the typical programs that we know about. And then I did want to mention something in this regard. I am sure perhaps more controversial with some of our panelists, but I think it's worth mentioning here. Our state is home to a lot of creative business people. And in manufacturing, there has been a push toward manufacturing modular housing. And I know that's been a point of controversy with the unions. There's been a lot of publicity about it. No hidden secret. Factory OS and others. Factory OS in particular has a partnership with the Carpenters Union. But I know for the trades, it's been a subject of controversy. Like, what is this really going to mean for the trades? And we have people, on site, and is the quality good enough, et cetera, et cetera. So there's been a lot of discussion about it. The one thing I would say, though, that I think is important to think about is, as you were saying, Jeremy, the kind of the conditions, at a work site, a construction work site, are particular conditions, and they work well for some people. They don't work as well for others. And I think this notion that, is it possible for us to think about innovating in the way we do construction of affordable, certainly at least of affordable housing in California, to consider approaches that are more, incorporate what would feel more like just a regular factory job in a single place, so that you're not having to run to different sites as a construction worker, perhaps be away from your family for periods of time, et cetera. More regular hours, working conditions that are perhaps a little more, you're able to have maybe more exert more control there. I think in terms of access for women and for others who perhaps have not accessed the traditional construction job sites as much, it's worth opening up our minds to how we might incorporate that into a future in California that is focused on high road employment, but that also seeks access to quality jobs for people who maybe traditionally haven't been able to get into that sector. So I just wanted to raise that. And I notably there has been some openness to hiring kind of non-traditional workers, and so.
Thanks, Carla. Any response on that. I think, I'm not sure if it was a question. It definitely was a statement. I'm not sure if you wanted a response, but no, I think these are important, big conversations we're having in the state around what this is going to look like going forward and building out. John, do you have thoughts to add here?
Yeah, I mean, I think for all of this, and I approached the question a couple of different ways. One is obviously relative to the construction, but also just non-traditional employment in general. California has, as you were kind of alluding, and not specific to just housing, but in terms of manufacturing, I think this state is on the verge of needing an industrial policy that looks at our transportation, which is where the greatest amount of greenhouse gas reduction has to take place. We just went through a pandemic where the ability of the state to get masks and other medical equipment was a real problem. There is I think a greater movement towards reshoring and other things. And the idea of asking explicitly, if we're going to take on this, how do we move the needle significantly for women, for communities of color, for other folks, and building a policy? But I think it's got to be based on demand. And I feel like often we don't, state and/or we do much better as a region asking the question of what's the demand and then how do we build the pipeline, but not sort of those investments that would incentivize the state asking the questions about how are you trying to get more women into manufacturing or transportation or whatever the sector is in that, and being more explicit. I think having monies for intermediaries that can demonstrate an ability to make some of those connections at the regional and local level are also important. For us, that's obviously labor as one important intermediary in that equation, and taking on some of the best practices that the building trades have had, which is, convening, holding days for women to come and understand what a particular trade or craft involves, getting their hands literally dirty, trying it out. There are places like IBW 11 in LA and others that do great work like that. Same with Tradeswomen Inc. and Winter in Southern California, and doing more of those, not just in construction. The trades have also, just to give Jeremy and the trades credit, they have built out a pre-apprenticeship in California, the multi-craft core curriculum programs, of which I don't know what the number is now, but somewhere near 50. There are a third of those that exist in the United States are in California. So the state has built, through the High Road Construction Initiative at the Workforce Board, has started to really build a formal pathway into the apprenticeship programs, which already are generating 90,000 construction apprentices. So both fixing the internal, which is unlike any other sector, is already established, building those on-ramps and figuring out how to further the partnerships that do that. The other piece I just want to say in this, aside from non-traditional stuff like building trades and manufacturing, a lot of apprenticeship opportunity, if it involves labor management training partnerships and labor, those in fact are, even in service sectors, in hospitality and others, if there's a union involved, there's the opportunity to have a career family sustaining wage. I mean, one of the findings out of the Future of Work Commission that Carla sat on was, if you have a degree or certificate, you're 33% less likely to be in a low wage job. If you're in a union job, that likelihood increases to 39%. So it's not just an access issue, and it's not just a skills gap issue. It's also kind of the worker voice piece in here too. And empowering more women to be part of that equation certainly is necessary, given they're over half of the state. And frankly, probably the biggest thing that we could do to address poverty is to move bulk women into family wage jobs, frankly, as much as anything else.
Rebecca, can I just add, I'd love to play off of what John was mentioning, and I think Carla as well. It's the work of all entities. And so corporations, companies have to do that work around shaping the culture within the organization and how they're creating spaces for women to show up in those jobs, right? And so I think that's something that as we think about training and development programming, it's the partnership with industry. So not only training the potential women to enter the workforce, training the teams within those organizations to be more inclusive and to create spaces that are really going to address some of the gender issues that do happen once, women enter in non-traditional fields. I do think there's also something to be said around the fact that it's also about getting folks excited to do whatever it is they want to do. And I feel like oftentimes we kind of say, do this thing, as opposed to like, hey, talk to me about what you're most excited about doing. What do you love doing? Is it, fixing things in the back? Are you really good with your hands? Do you like physical work? And then really coming up with plans to get folks into those training and educational environments to get access to the types of jobs that they are most excited about, because that's where they'll be most successful, and definitely other opportunities will come from it. But I feel like we haven't done enough of that, even in the middle school, high school. It's like, let's invite you to dream out loud about your future. And I know that's touchy-feely, but it's like, okay, what do you get excited about doing in the morning without throwing your alarm clock out the window? And then let's build some training and development around it.
Yeah, and to the point earlier, I think for that effort, it's also about having access and understanding of occupations that you might not be hearing about. Like we talked about the construction trades, and that's certainly true in healthcare. And I think in healthcare, another thing we see is similar to what was mentioned about construction trades. You need to know what you're getting into. You need to have exposure to what you might be dealing with. Is that something you really want or not? But to your point, like you can actually get pretty excited about what those opportunities are. And some of those are great paying jobs. But I think what we want to do also is think about how we use the labor management partnership to improve those jobs and increase the wages that are associated with those jobs, so that folks really do have, the support they need in their job to raise their families, support their lives. This is really exciting. And I see there's two questions, and I want to go to the second question first, because I think it builds off of everything you're talking about, which is how do we ensure that high school trades education, including pre-apprenticeships, continues to be a key piece in the workforce pipeline. And then I just want to acknowledge there's been an ongoing question out there on a regional effort in San Gabriel Valley that I'm going to come to as well.
Well, I'll start with this, and I touched on it a few minutes ago, but back when my parents went to high school, I'm 47, high schools trained you for a career and college or college.
Right.
And then somewhere along the line, policymakers decided that high schools needed to concentrate on just college. And we need to get high schools back to that college or career mindset. I mean, you get high schools, I'm sorry if I said colleges, we need to get high schools back to that college or career mindset, because not everybody can go to college. Not everybody can afford college. Not everybody likes school, sitting in the classroom. There are a myriad reasons why people can't go to college. And we've taken CTE courses out of college, out of high school, excuse me. And, the most high schools adhere to the UC system, their requirements, and those are known as, in the education code, as the A through G standards. So you've got, in the education code, there's A through G, and there's a list of things you've got to meet class-wise to get into the UC system. And most CSUs adhere to that as well. CTE is an option in like letter E of that list, right? And so it's convincing policymakers in high schools, it's convincing policymakers, first of all, that college is not for everybody, college cannot be for everybody. And then it's convincing schools and school districts to carve out some time in a school day to have a required CTE course. Now that brings in the teachers unions because there's only so many hours in a school day. So it gets a little complicated, but we really need to get back to requiring a career technical education course. And again, we're agnostic. We'd love it to be a shop class where you work with tools and you build something, but it can be a computer programming class, culinary, nursing, There's all kinds of different CTE courses out there. We just need to make sure kids can get into them so they get an idea that there is something out there for them if they can't go to college. There's a career where you can be a nurse or where you can program computers or whatever, right? And so that's a big part of answering that question, is getting policymakers in schools to realize they've got to carve some time out in the school day every year in a high school kid's career to do that, spend a little time in a CTE course.
Rebecca?
Yeah.
Yeah, we've participated on an advisory committee with the California Partnership Academies that are held by the California Department of Ed. They are schools within schools in the high school. Half of the kids are at risk of not graduating, and they have industry themes. And they have been very successful. They're a lot of what Link Learning learned about and frankly has taken their results from and built off of. They've been really good. In an example to me, the main piece of all of this, and it also is the community college piece too, is to involve industry, to involve employers and labor in creating your programs and creating that pipeline. And in that instance, we helped Jeremy in the state building trades. There are 7 high schools that have the multi-craft core curriculum. They're one of the registered pre-apprentice programs. And then we ultimately worked with UC Berkeley's Department of Education, and those high schools then turned those MC3 programs and got A to G credit for some of the work. So that the idea being that pipeline could either be into apprenticeship or into the UC CSU system. And I think more of that kind of partnership and thinking is useful. We've done something similar with the community colleges where we've taken an apprentice program, and then within that, and this is in transportation with Mission College and Amalgamated Transit Union in Santa Clara Valley, created a certificate of achievement. So apprentices are actually getting certificates of achievement within the community college system, so that pipeline of the college, which is also part of dealing with the incumbent workforce, it has that pipeline kind of going forward. So it's more, I would just say, having both at the high school and the community college level, having industry involvement is the key piece of that whole equation.
Yeah, I see Andrea wanting to get in on that. Yeah.
I'm like, let me dance. Okay, let's make this happen. So, Jeremy and John, I want to just play off of both of what you all were mentioning. I think one is funding, right? So strong workforce program funding through the community colleges and K-12 was the first time that there has been sustained funding in career education in that way in quite some time. It was kind of flavor of the month, focus on this, focus on that before, right? So now having some sustained funding year after year provides a space for infrastructure and planning and more thoughtful engagement around industry partnerships. At Skyline, also just the legislation of AB 288 around college and career access pathway partnerships, making that type of work much easier, has been also really instrumental. In, within 3 years, we went from just about 50 dual enrollment students to over 2,000 and about 3,700 enrollments this academic year during a pandemic in things like biotech, automotive, child development. So they're working and prepping towards a career, but also getting college credit and working through a certificate and degree and supporting the disproportionately impacted Black, African-American, Latinx students who don't normally see themselves as going to college, also preparing for a career so they can enter and then continue their education when it makes the most sense, right? Because eventually folks will tap out with that certain amount of training that they're getting in high school and even in their initial certs. And so I think that it's about sustained funding. It's about the legislation that allows the amount of college units for high school students to get access to that. And also, as you mentioned, John, just the partnership with employers, making sure that there is that thoughtful engagement with employers so that they're leading to jobs, seamless connection from that training into jobs, but also representative of the demographic of the students that you're trying to serve, right? So you're really bringing in, guest lecturers and speakers and folks doing job shadows and a variety of different experiences. So it really does bolster their learning and certainly their connection to a livable wage job. So thanks, John and Jeremy, for setting me up so I could cue that really well.
And Carla, are you?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I really appreciated what everyone has said, and John's emphasis on kind of partnerships, you know, at the community level. And I guess what I just would offer is, traditionally we think about high schools, colleges, unions, employers as our sort of nodes for all of this. But if you're talking about getting young people who are on the verge of or already have dropped out of school at a young age, then you're talking about, generally, if you're going to find them anywhere, community-based organizations of various sorts, as well as this growing tier of employment social enterprises. And I know how difficult it is because there are a lot of them and they're scattered all over the place. And I appreciated what John, you said about intermediaries and the, you know, unions being one obvious one. But there are, you know, others. And I think the more we can do to foster connections between union employer efforts, these serious efforts, and the institutions at the community level, which, albeit maybe smaller and more, you know, kind of naturally community based, they may be seeing the people that otherwise you are not. And particularly because employment social enterprise is an employer based initiative, or, you know, way of going about things, you're talking to employers there who are trying to help often young people figure out where they're headed, and they don't know yet which sector they wish to go into. But I just think that might be a ripe area for, you know, just for building out more partnership. And I know you're making, you know, you're making a big effort on that anyhow, but I think there's a lot of opportunity there, and that is where, you know, young people find themselves. If, as you said so well, Jeremy, I wholeheartedly agree, you know, traditional schooling is not the path they're going to take, you know.
Yeah, there's so much to hear. I mean, the thing that strikes me too, just in the work that we are embarking on through the Interagency Committee on Apprenticeship, is also just this idea of how do we start to systematically build out those access points and those collaborations. And there's been a lot of discussion about sort of like regional intermediaries or regional approaches to doing this work, because it does sort of try to build on some of the regionalism that's already active in the state, as well as in the workforce system, as well as thinking about how to sort of like organize everyone, if you will, at both a local and bigger than a local level, and thinking about how to scale out some of these pathways and opportunities for folks and make them really visible. And I sort of want to hear folks' thoughts about these kind of regional approaches, or things that you think work, or things that are needed and don't yet exist. But also there was specifically a question somebody raised around San Gabriel Valley. And just to quickly flip to that, they wanted to know specifically, I think from Jeremy or from others on the panel, about potential apprenticeship opportunities in construction and electric trades in the San Gabriel Valley. So I just want to sort of highlight that as a backdrop question, but also sort of surface this idea. And I know, obviously, Andrea, you're probably working at a regional level, and a lot of the rest of us are working, you know, in Carla's case, national or statewide. But just to sort of get your thoughts on how to build this out, what kind of policies, what kind of systemic change might be needed, what kind of opportunities you see for building on those regional approaches.
I'll start just by adding a couple of things around kind of regional and statewide. It still needs to happen locally. And so it can be really thoughtfully scaled at a region, but you have to have local capacity, and you have to take what's happening locally that's really awesome and scale it regionally and statewide, or the other way. But oftentimes it helps if it is local, because, and I always joke about San Mateo County, I'm like, we are regional. There's 3 colleges there. We serve the entire, you know, San Mateo County. To me, that is regional. But within kind of the California community college system, it's like, you know, Monterey to Santa Rosa. And I'm like, okay, wait a minute. We're kind of getting lost in the shuffle, because there's so many different needs within that space. And so I think it's about imagining the work that's having local impact in a really phenomenal way, and thinking about how do you share that so that it can scale where it makes the most sense across the region and the state. If it's coming down from the perspective of like, this is a regional thing, we should do it, everybody in the region, you kind of send everyone over here to do something that may not be the right fit for every area within the local space. So I do think regional scale is critical where it makes the most sense to serve the employers in your area and the student interest. But I do think that there's some lessons to be learned around also the importance of local implementation and how that can really bring up the types of things like you mentioned, Rebecca. What are the systemic changes that need to exist, right? Or need to also be altered as you move things out. And so I'll just kind of, I don't want to go too much down a rabbit hole in that space, but at some point there are local entities that need to carry out the work. And so it's really about that thoughtful engagement of the right folks at the right time.
Well, we have two IBW locals in Los Angeles, 18 and 11. 18 is kind of up north and 11 is down by LAX. I don't know if that's a direct answer, or a good enough answer, but I mean, there are two very robust IBW locals in the LA area. So reaching out to go and looking at their websites and reaching out to them there would be a good start as a specific answer to this question.
Maybe just to try to bring in one of the themes that are already in the chat, somebody brought up Youth Build, which is a fantastic network of organizations that provide training to opportunity youth. We have many in California, very important. And I think maybe they're a good example, or I just wanted to reflect on what you just said, Andrea. Youth Build operates very locally. But they're also connected in certain ways to regional, national networks. And, it's the reality is for individual people, their work life is in a region. It's generally not restricted to their city or their county jurisdiction. I mean, it's broader than that. And yet, all the entities, the community colleges, the local high schools, the workforce boards are very local. And, so there's a lot of complexity. And I do think in that regard, unions and employers that cross multiple jurisdictions, but also have deep roots locally, can obviously play a big role. But I don't think there's an easy answer to, I think Andrea put it well. There's a lot of complexity to trying to operate at a regional level. It's good though, because people's work lives tend to be regional in scope. But you've got to be hyper local, in access to the specific services or prioritization, et cetera. So no easy answer there. You're on mute, Rebecca.
Sorry, yeah, I just I appreciate the localness, because I don't know about folks, your experience in this, but in our doing registered apprenticeship, we really have to get down to almost like a department level manager who's hosting the OJT and precepting that, nurse apprentice on the job. So anyway, I just appreciate just like how much we have to drill down. One thing I'll say that over time in trying to do that work that has become more real for me is just this opportunity to be able to tap into potentially regional, career technical education that facilitates then that, aggregating a regional demand around particular occupations, where then each work site, especially for like in a hospital or a facility, like they're going to need one or two, right? So how do you get the sort of regional demand for 10 or 12 a year served at the same time that it's creating a clear path, so people know that that's a pathway that's open for a sustained long-term opportunities. And thank you for calling out the Youth Build example, because I think this is such an important important kind of opportunity that we need to create for youth who are out of school and out of work. Like, and I can only imagine that that's increased dramatically now with the pandemic. We have another question. Okay, so they're explaining the program more, 6 months of active training, 12 months of follow-up. So I guess one question I have is when you think about this goal of 500,000 apprentices, like, is this something that sort of, I think obviously connecting youth in the pipeline is a huge piece of it. I think really critically, there's a broad recognition here that you can train all the people you want, but if you don't have sort of industry engaged and employers at the table and job sites identified, you know, that we really do need to sort of systemically be in like using public investment in projects is something Jeremy mentioned. And I think all of us sort of recognize in our work, like how critical employers are to really understanding the demand side of what opportunities folks have and what we can train for. Do folks have feelings about like how we attain that goal? I mean, I can imagine that it's not either or, like it's both, you know, increasing access, having industry engaged and building out sort of regional and local capability and systemic capability to connect people to good jobs. But I think, see, John, you've come off mute. Maybe you have a sense of this.
I think, first of all, the piece that's missing is laying out the demand side of that equation. What is going to be the demand in which sectors and in which occupations that would actually get you to start to prioritize those pathways and apprentices that you want to put out. I do think the one big area that I think could cut across a lot of stuff would be sort of public sector initiatives, both in terms of pathways and creating apprenticeships in general. So LA County, you know, it doesn't hurt to have Hilda Solis and Sheila Kuehl on your County Board of Commissioners and said, you know, we hire 10 to 20,000 workers a year. Maybe we need to think about how we bring in residents who come from the reentry community, come from homeless community, and figure out the pathways and strategies to do that. And then they turn to the Worker Education Resource Center that SEIU 7-to-1 has built on the healthcare side to kind of actually implement that piece. City of LA is looking at 1,000 Strong initiative that is looking to create pathways for African Americans from LA into city jobs and doing that. I've always thought that whether it was the building trades side of things and looking regionally, that are there ways to aggregate what, you know, I live in the East Bay, what Berkeley, Oakland, UC Berkeley, AC Tran, all of those public institutions are doing, and sitting down with our Building Trades Council and the Port of Oakland and figuring out sort of what that demand is, and is there a way to create a real bigger bang for your buck if, again, based on what Jeremy is saying, is you're making sure that those institutions are actually getting invested in terms of the actual construction work. But I think those kinds of things, probably the public sector may be the one big way to go. And I think maybe manufacturing and maybe healthcare. I mean, that's, I guess, if I was in Sacramento, I would be really trying to figure out, particularly in those three areas where we know there's a demand going forward, to how to build the biggest bang towards getting to that 500,000. But right now, nobody's articulating where those are all going to come from.
Where they're coming from, yeah. That was a good start though, John. Thank you.
Rebecca, you also kind of mentioned it, but it's like partnership development, right? I know folks like, let's run the other way when we have to talk about, you know, getting married with folks, right? I don't want to say it that way, but it's, you know, you're spending a lot of time in different folks from different entities, and you oftentimes speak different languages. So it's like, how do you norm your engagement? How do you, you know, stay thoughtfully connected? How do you really support each other's, you know, interests in a way that's super thoughtful? And so, you you know, whenever folks talk about like, oh, how did you get that to happen with this particular employer? And I remember one of our employers turning around saying she speaks our language at one point. And that's always stuck with me when I transitioned in to community college. And so it's the ability to understand that not everybody's going to have the same interests, but the outcome ideally will be the same. And so how are you mindful of supporting the larger collaborative's interest in moving these types of partnerships forward? And so, but it's, you know, I joke about even our high school district partnerships and dual enrollment. And it's like, we are text messaging, you know, 5 times a week. We're on emails, you know, we have 3-4 meetings a month. You're really in this all the time to move it forward. And so taking on that commitment is so huge.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes sense.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, I mean, I think setting the big goal is the first step, right? I mean, now there is a goal and it's a numeric goal. So people, that's very important. But then who's signing on to that goal? Does anybody share it as a goal? Is it John's goal? You know, it's
Right.
so does the employer community share this goal? Does anybody in the legislature share? So there's like bringing the parties in who share the goal, and then there's accountability. Who has accountability? How is that accountability happening? And then how are the resources flowing to meet the goal?
Right.
And then make it transparent so that we're pushing ourselves. And, you know, and I do think, I mean, all of that, you know, as was mentioned, it's like, you know, you're getting in the chat, the Goodwill and Youth Build and Kitchens for Good and social enterprise. And, you know, there are a lot of actors in California that are not thought of enough as part of the mainstream of our workforce development system, that are raising their hands and saying, we want to be part of this. And I think figuring out how to make them part of it would be important. I would mention, just in relation to what John said, you know, also like anchor institutions, you know, we have a big effort at UCSF right now. They're trying to figure out how do they do more hiring from the community, use procurement to, you know, et cetera. So, you know, I think it's those perhaps nodes that haven't been seen as active parts of the system, of the workforce development system, I think are willing and eager now to be brought in. That could get us there, help get us there.
That makes a lot of sense. And I'll share that. And I've heard this like a few times from different folks on the panel, specifically, definitely Jeremy, and I think John too, is just like, I know from talking to a lot of similar organizations to my own labor management partnership, that we often see ourselves in that boat too, that we're not sort of always thought of as officially part of the workforce system, but that we're doing key and scale work with employer engagement, with the employer sitting at the table, with a worker focus. And often our employers are saying like, we want to do more community hire programs. We want, you know, like to procurement methods, specifically all the things you're talking about, Carla. So just to do appreciate that. And like, we have a lot of folks doing extraordinary work. Like, how do we think about sort of systemically transitioning that into, you know, active, open, accessible pathways for people in California into those jobs. Okay, good.
I was just going to say, it's important to remember, you know, it's not like the unions in some of these industries haven't tried to organize workers. And so you need, what works for us in the building trades is we have a close partnership with our management.
Yeah.
And that ensures that apprentices aren't paid the minimum wage and they actually earn benefits. And, you know, they're construction workers earning a percentage of the journey person's wage. Somebody's got to step forward and bring the employers to the table in some of these industries that have been recalcitrant about unions and against treating workers the right way unless they're made to do it. That's how you get more apprenticeship, when you have more management, more employers stepping up and saying, okay, let's get a collective bargaining agreement here. Let's jointly create an apprenticeship program, you know. And so that our model, the earn and learn model, it only works when you have both sides willing to negotiate and be party to an agreement. It doesn't always happen.
No, on that note, I recently heard somebody talk about a conversation I really appreciated around an employer asking about ROI and on a training opportunity, and somebody, it was a community-based organization, but somebody was like, the ROI is your community, like you're investing. And I just think often, you know, I have the benefit of working in a labor management partnership, but I've had a lot of conversations with folks working on building out apprenticeship models in non-union settings. And they're like, well, how do you get the wages set? Like, I'm like, it's called a union, it's called collective bargaining. Like, these are the sort of basic tenets that assist in getting us those standards in place. And certainly the relationship and the partnership to make that happen is really critical. And it's hard to imagine that happening without sort of an active role for labor and making that happen. Okay, so I know we have, we might be, oh yeah, we're just 1 minute. I don't know if there's any final comments from anybody. Oh, John, go ahead.
The only thing I would say is the success we've had in creating non-traditional apprenticeships and other labor management partnerships, and I think it's probably something for everybody else to think about, is usually think about it from a problem-solving standpoint or a return on investment. It's often we've got a health and safety issue, or there's an adaptation in technology, or the entire half of the workforce at the transit agency is about to retire and they need to replace them. It's from that end that you probably, by engaging industry and starting with that, maybe sometimes is the best way to begin that conversation, to figure out what the training partnership and the role and the return for everybody is in that particular equation. That's just a suggestion on my part.
Yeah, thank you, John. That's great. So just closing on that, I want to really thank our panelists today, and also folks who chimed in on the chat or raised your questions. I'm really excited for this to be an ongoing conversation, excited for the potential for greater levels of partnership and coordination to kind of really help realize what this model has to offer us in California. And to John's point, you know, that we sort of roll up our sleeves and figure out how to have those problem-solving conversations to really build that out. So thank you. And with that, I will let you go. And I think we're going, I don't know, Alicia, if you want to say anything about the next. I know there's a final session today back in the main room.
Sorry, just popping on here.
Yeah.
No, if everyone can go back to the main platform, and you'll be able to log and pop right into the closeout. So that'll be held by, I believe NSC is hosting that piece.
Thank you, Alicia. Okay, well, folks, thanks again. Thanks, Carla,
Thanks,
John,
everybody.
Jeremy, and Andrea. Have a great afternoon, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Yep.